every farmer, I was going to say in Britain, but in the world is going to look at this now and say, I must have that on my farm. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick out the traditional farming market, bollocks, which is on the other side, with a run back, and you can see how useless that is.
What if Jeremy Clarkson's farm was never just about farming? To millions, Diddley Squat is a story of crop failures, planning battles, and disasters. But behind the cameras lies a far bigger strategy: a tax-saving land investment, a multi-million-pound TV deal, a booming beer empire, and a model that turns setbacks into profit. Every failed restaurant, every council dispute, every headline seems to fuel something larger. So is Clarkson really struggling to run a farm, or has he quietly built one of Britain's smartest business empires? Let's uncover the strategy behind it. Clarkson's hidden master plan. Start with the land, because everything else at Diddley Squat only makes sense once you understand why Clarkson bought it in the first place. In 2008, while property markets across Britain were collapsing, Clarkson quietly purchased roughly 1,000 acres near Chipping Norton, formerly known as Curdle Hill Farm, for a reported £6 million. He didn't farm it himself. For over a decade, the land was contract farmed by a local villager, growing a standard rotation of wheat, barley, and rapeseed, while Clarkson carried on with Top Gear and, later, the Grand Tour. It was only in 2019, when that contract farmer retired, that Clarkson decided to run the place himself, a decision that eventually became the entire premise of Clarkson's farm. Here's the part that matters for understanding the business logic underneath all of it. In a 2021 interview with The Times, Clarkson admitted that avoiding inheritance tax was the critical thing behind the purchase. Farmland in Britain has long qualified for agricultural property relief, a rule that let working farms pass from one generation to the next without the usual 40% inheritance tax bill. Buy land, farm it, and when you die, your children inherit it tax-free. Combine that with land values that only tend to go up, and you've got an asset that quietly appreciates in the background, no matter how the actual farming goes. Diddley Squat has reportedly done exactly that, roughly doubling in value since 2008, which means the land itself has already made Clarkson more money, quietly and without any camera crew involved, than the farm's actual output ever has. That appreciation happens whether the harvest is good or bad, whether the council approves a planning application or blocks it, and whether the show gets renewed for another series or not, which is exactly the point of buying land in the first place. Then, in November 2024, the government pulled the rug out from under that entire strategy. The autumn budget announced that from April 2026, full relief would only apply to the first £1 million of combined agricultural and business assets, with a 20% rate kicking in above that. The Treasury argued the change targeted wealthy landowners using farmland as a tax shelter rather than working farmers, pointing out that a small fraction of claims, under 10%, accounted for around 40% of the total relief being claimed. Thousands of farmers still marched on Westminster in protest, and Clarkson was right there with them, which created an awkward moment for him personally, because journalists immediately pointed out that the tax break he was now defending was the same one he'd credited for buying the farm in the first place. Confronted by a BBC reporter about it, Clarkson brushed the question off with 2 words, classic BBC, before explaining that the real motivation had always been wanting to shoot pheasants on his own land, and that citing inheritance tax had just been a convenient excuse to avoid getting shouted at by animal rights campaigners. The government eventually softened the policy after sustained pressure, allowing married couples and civil partners to combine their allowances for up to £5 million in tax-free agricultural assets. Even so, Clarkson has continued warning in his Sunday Times column that plenty of working farms will still get caught by the new rules. since the threshold only moved from 1 million to £2.5 million per person, rather than being scrapped entirely. What's genuinely interesting here isn't whether Clarkson personally dodges a tax bill. It's that the same farm generating all this TV drama also happens to be a textbook example of exactly the kind of asset the government is now trying to tax more heavily, and Clarkson has ended up simultaneously benefiting from the old rules and campaigning against changes to the new ones. The land was never just a farm. It was always a financial position first, and a television set second, and every other business on this list exists because that position was already secure before a single potato went in the ground. It's also worth being fair to the other side of this argument, because the debate around the tax change got genuinely heated. Farming lobby groups claimed as many as 70,000 family farms could be affected, a figure Treasury officials and independent tax analysts pushed back on hard, putting the real number closer to 500 estates per year, almost all of them large landholdings rather than small family operations. Clarkson's farm, worth somewhere north of £12 million and generating income well beyond agriculture, sits much closer to the type of estate the reform was actually designed to catch than the smaller family farms whose plight dominated the protest coverage. That doesn't make his farm unusual. It makes it a fairly accurate example of exactly why the policy exists in the first place, wrapped in the image of a struggling countryside business that the television show has spent 5 series building. The £144 farm that wasn't the business. With the land itself already working as an appreciating, tax-advantaged asset, the actual farming almost didn't need to succeed at all, which is convenient, because it didn't. Everyone remembers the headline number from Series 1. Clarkson's farm made a grand total of £144 profit in its first year. It became a running joke, proof that the whole venture was a rich man's expensive hobby. What actually happened underneath that number tells a completely different story. Within a single year of the farm shop opening, the business went from £44,000 in assets and 6 employees to £1.34 million in assets and 17 employees, with the company's capital jumping from just over £2,000 to more than £211,000. That's not the trajectory of a failing hobby farm. That's a business scaling fast, just not through the crops. The real engine was never the wheat or the barley. It was the television deal sitting on top of it. Amazon is reported to pay Clarkson somewhere in the region of £10 million a year, covering both the Grand Tour and Clarkson's farm, and the farming show has become one of Prime Video's most watched original series in the UK, with international audiences picking it up too. Every crop failure, every argument with the council, every disastrous harvest that would financially ruin an ordinary farmer becomes an episode that pulls in millions of viewers. The farm barely breaks even most years. The show about the farm breaking even is where the actual money is made. It's a strange kind of arithmetic, but it works. Agricultural failure, filmed correctly, is more profitable than agricultural success, and it explains why nothing at Diddley Squat ever seems to get fixed for very long. The farm shop itself came out of pure necessity rather than strategy, which is what makes it fit so naturally into everything else here. In his first year, Clarkson grew 40 tons of potatoes with nowhere to sell them, since supermarkets weren't interested in such a small quantity. So he put up a shed and started selling them directly. That shed is now one of the most consistently busy parts of the entire operation, packed with visitors buying everything from honey to the show's trademark cheekily named produce, and the range has since expanded onto Amazon Fresh, letting fans order the farm's rum, jams, and chutneys without making the trip to Chadlington at all. It draws people from across the country, specifically because it's connected to the show, which means the show is generating retail customers, and the retail shop is generating more content for the show. Neither one really works without the other, and neither one would exist at all if the land underneath them wasn't already a safe bet, regardless of how the shop performed. None of this happens without Kaleb Cooper, the young farm manager who was already working the land under the previous contract farmer when Clarkson bought it. Kaleb went from earning 50 pence an hour on his own farm work to running 3 separate companies. Broken down company by company, his television production business alone holds close to £1 million in assets, including around 400,000 in cash, while his separate contracting company and a holdings company tied to his own land ambitions each contribute smaller 5-figure sums on top. The kind of diversified structure you'd expect from someone thinking well past this single television show. He's published 2 books and toured the country with his own live show. Clarkson is smart enough to know the series doesn't work without him. Kaleb's genuine farming knowledge and total lack of interest in celebrity nonsense is exactly what makes the banter between the two of them land. And it's a small reminder that the empire isn't just making Clarkson richer. It's built an entirely separate fortune for the 26-year-old standing next to him in every episode, while Clarkson's own total net worth, spread across television, writing, and now agriculture, is estimated at somewhere around £55 million, a figure the farm alone would never have gotten near without everything built on top of it. The battle that never really ends. If the farm shop and the TV deal are the 2 engines quietly making money, West Oxfordshire District Council is the friction that keeps both of them running hot. Nearly every series features some version of the same conflict. Clarkson wants to build something, the council says no, and the fallout becomes the emotional spine of that season. It looks, on the surface, like an ordinary planning dispute. In practice, it's turned into one of the most reliable content engines the whole show has, and it feeds directly back into the retail side of the business covered a moment ago. One of the more overlooked fights was over where the farm shop's produce could actually come from. The original planning condition restricted goods to whatever was grown on the farm itself, or sourced from local producers within the West Oxfordshire district boundary, an area of around 275 square miles. Clarkson's team applied to expand that to a 30-mile radius, arguing the shop should be treated the same as a market cooperative, which would have covered nearly 2,800 square miles of sourcing territory. The parish council pushed back hard, warning it would undercut the village's own shop, butcher and cafe. The district council eventually split the difference, granting a radius of 16 miles, half of what Clarkson's team had asked for. It's a small, unglamorous planning decision, but it's exactly the kind of bureaucratic tug-of-war the show has turned into genuinely compelling television, and it kept the shop firmly rooted in local suppliers, rather than becoming a national brand overnight. This wasn't even the first time the shop's local sourcing rules caused friction. Back in 2020, shortly after the shop first opened, Chadlington's parish council formally complained that produce being sold there breached the original condition limiting stock to goods grown on the farm or sourced locally, and separately objected to straw bales, covered in fabric, being used as makeshift cafe seating during the pandemic, arguing it broke COVID regulations. Clarkson's response was, characteristically, to carry on regardless while negotiations continued in the background. It's a pattern that repeats throughout this entire relationship with the council. A complaint gets filed, Clarkson keeps operating, and the eventual resolution, whichever way it goes, ends up as content either way. The most dramatic version of this conflict played out around the farm restaurant. Clarkson wanted to convert a barn into a restaurant serving beef, lamb, and beer produced on the farm. The council refused permission. Clarkson opened it anyway in a lambing shed, and it operated for roughly a month before the council issued an enforcement notice and shut it down, with a planning inspector later confirming the restaurant had been unlawful. That entire saga, the opening, the crowds, the closure, became the central storyline of an entire series, generating enormous attention, while the restaurant itself made almost no money in the time it was open. The council itself has publicly said it doesn't want to see the farm shop close, and that it's approved plenty of the farm's applications over the years, including the shop and the lambing shed, but that it has no choice but to enforce the rules once a breach is reported. The failed restaurant lost money for a few weeks. The television drama about the failed restaurant made money for years, and it directly set up the pub venture covered later in this video. Since the restaurant dream never actually died, it just moved down the road. Even the traffic became part of the story. When the farm shop first exploded in popularity, so many visitors descended on Chadlington that police were needed to manage a traffic jam stretching roughly 3 miles, and Clarkson publicly apologized to furious locals for the disruption. When he applied to expand the car park, the council rejected it, citing the area's protected natural beauty. Visitors kept parking on country lanes regardless, causing more chaos, which in turn became more evidence, presented in a later planning appeal, that the farm shop had simply become too popular for its existing infrastructure. In Series 3, that appeal succeeded, granting temporary permission for a proper car park alongside mixed use covering the shop, a cafe, a restaurant, and parking for 3 years. The cameras caught Clarkson visibly emotional when he got the news. What makes this genuinely clever, whether or not it was planned that way, is that the permission is only temporary. It expires and needs renewing in 2026, which guarantees the council's storyline isn't finished. Every resolution just sets up the next round of the same fight, on a farm that was already winning financially, long before any of these battles were settled. Amazon, for its part, keeps renewing the show regardless of how any individual planning fight resolves, which tells you plainly enough which side of this arrangement is actually driving the profit. While the council fight was dragging on, one part of Diddley Squat quietly grew into something bigger than the farm itself. Of everything Clarkson has built here, Hawkstone is the one that stopped looking like a side project and started looking like a serious company in its own right. Launched in 2021 using barley grown on the farm, Hawkstone Lager was originally meant to be sold only through the farm shop covered a moment ago. It quickly outgrew that plan entirely. In the year to March 2025, Hawkstone posted sales of £21.3 million, nearly tripling the previous year's £7.8 million, a growth rate that landed it 23rd on the Sunday Times list of Britain's fastest-growing private companies. The company's total equity jumped from around £432,000 to just over £3 million in that same period. The distribution numbers tell the same story. Hawkstone went from being stocked in around 500 pubs to more than 2,000 within roughly a year, and it's now sold in Waitrose, Morrison's, Sainsbury's, Ocado, and Majestic Wine. Heineken has taken a minority stake to help with logistics and distribution, which is a serious vote of confidence from a company that knows exactly what a genuinely scalable beer brand looks like. To actually keep up with demand, Hawkstone brews through partners, including a well-established Glasgow brewery that also produces one of Scotland's biggest lager brands. The kind of production backing a genuine tie-in beer rarely needs, and a sign of just how far past novelty status the brand has already moved. The range itself has grown well beyond the original lager too, expanding into cider, gin and vodka, with Kaleb Cooper lending his name to the cider line specifically, giving the brand 2 recognizable faces from the show instead of just one, and tying his own growing fortune even more tightly to the farm's television success. Clarkson himself hasn't been shy about the ambition here, telling the Times he wants total domination of the British lager market, and naming Peroni specifically as the competitor he intends to push out of UK pubs. Hawkstone has actually had 3 separate adverts banned by the Advertising Standards Authority since launch. One for Clarkson's fairly explicit choice of words about how good the beer tasted, one for a joke comparing it favorably to Birmingham, and a third for showing Clarkson drinking it before work in a way regulators judged promoted irresponsible drinking. Each ban generated far more attention than the ad would have gotten if it had simply been allowed to run. It's a pattern that shows up again and again across this whole operation. The same pattern that turned a rejected car park into a marketing story and a shut-down restaurant into a season finale. Controversy and rejection somehow keep translating into free publicity. The farm grows a portion of the barley that goes into Hawkstone. The brewery, run as a genuinely separate business, keeps the overwhelming majority of the profit. It's a rare example of a celebrity-fronted product that's grown past the celebrity and become a real, fast-scaling business in its own right, one that would likely be thriving even if Clarkson stepped back from it entirely, which makes it the closest thing in this whole empire to a normal, sustainable company rather than a spin-off of the television show. Hawkstone's own managing director has credited the growth to the British farmers supplying its barley, wheat and apples, and to the thousands of pubs now willing to stock it, framing the brand publicly as a genuine agricultural success story rather than a celebrity gimmick, which after 4 years and a Sunday Times fastest-growing company ranking is getting harder and harder to argue with. The business that broke every rule. By the time Clarkson decided to open a pub, the pattern running through this entire empire was already well established. Whatever looks like the worst financial decision usually turns out to be the one generating the most attention. In 2024, he spent under £1 million buying a rural pub near Burford, formerly known as the Windmill, and reopened it as the Farmer's Dog. The concept was simple and, on paper, financially reckless. Serve only British-produced food, with 0 foreign ingredients allowed anywhere on the menu. That means British black pepper instead of imported, British beef instead of cheaper alternatives, and a cost structure that pushed mains up toward £15 to £19 and pints to around £5.50. Prices that drew immediate complaints online about a pub that was supposed to feel like a proper local. Clarkson has been unusually candid about how badly this has gone financially, in the same way he's been candid about nearly every other failure across this whole operation. He's publicly admitted he was wrong about how difficult the hospitality industry would be, and described the pub as a way of turning £100 into roughly 94, losing money on nearly every meal served. The opening itself came with its own disaster, when a plumbing incident in the toilets was severe enough that Clarkson said he had to bring in specialist hazmat cleaners to deal with it. None of this stopped the pub from becoming an instant destination. Hundreds of people queued for hours on opening day in August 2024, arriving from well outside the Cotswolds, specifically because of the show, and the queues haven't really stopped since, echoing the exact same pattern the farm shop went through years earlier. Open something modest, get overwhelmed by fans of the television series, and spend the following months managing a popularity problem rather than a lack of customers. Clarkson has leaned into the pub's celebrity status in smaller, deliberately publicized ways too. He's banned a handful of people from the premises over the months since opening, including Prime Minister Keir Starmer and his own former Top Gear co-star James May, and posted about a customer who complained about pricing online, telling them flatly they were now barred. None of these bans cost him anything, and every single one turned into a news story, which by this point in the video should feel like a familiar move, rather than a coincidence. It's the same instinct that turned a rejected planning application into a season finale, and a banned advert into free marketing, just applied to running a pub instead of a farm. The one thing keeping the pub out of serious financial trouble, according to Clarkson himself, is Hawkstone. Because the pub sells his own beer and cider, and he keeps the full margin on those sales rather than splitting it with a separate supplier, the drinks are effectively subsidizing the food, and every pint sold at the Farmer's Dog is also, in a small way, marketing for a brand already growing at over 100% a year. On the pub grounds sits the old touring tent from the Grand Tour, now repurposed into a small retail complex, an outdoor kitchen called the Farmer's Puppy, a butcher's shop called Hops and Chops, and another branch of the diddly squat farm shop selling merchandise. Visitors who can't get a table inside can still spend money at any of these without ever setting foot in the actual restaurant. The pub isn't really designed to turn a profit on food. It's designed to be a physical showcase for British farming, a location for Series 4, and above all else, a very effective place to sell beer where Clarkson keeps every penny of the margin. Losing money on purpose only works if something else in the building is making it back. And at the Farmer's Dog, that something else, the beer built out of the farm's own barley, is doing exactly its job. So here's the truth behind Diddly Squat. A farm that barely breaks even, sitting quietly on land worth £12 million. A beer brand doing 21 million a year. A pub that loses money on every meal, kept alive purely by that same beer's margin. A council fight that's dragged on for 5 series and still isn't finished. None of these pieces work particularly well on their own, but stitched together, they form one of the most quietly brilliant business models in modern Britain. Clarkson built all of it while insisting, every episode, that he understands nothing about business. If this fascinates you, hit subscribe and stay tuned for more.